So one of the benefits of having a YouTube channel is that I get to try a lot of different gear. Now, it's great, it's a lot of fun, but there's a downside to it. Once you try 80 pairs of speakers at your home, you kind of become numb and you're hoping that the next speaker that comes in will be different. I'll give you an example. You know, I've owned maybe 5-6 pairs of Focal speakers. Yes, each level is better than the other one, maybe better soundstage, better speed, and so forth. But the overall tonal characteristic is very similar. So in some sense, it's not that exciting, quote unquote. So whenever I come across something that's different, that's where it gets me excited. For example, recently I picked up the Manapan LRS. And for me, I've never owned a Manapan before. So when I listen to it, I'm like, wow, this is so good. This is interesting. Now today, I'm going to talk about the Acoustic Energy 509 speaker. I know if you look at it, it looks like a normal speaker, but it sounds different compared to all the other speakers I've tried. And I'm wondering, is it because it uses not only carbon fiber woofer, but also carbon fiber tweeter? When I first heard it at my place, I was definitely blown away. And today we're going to talk about it. Now, Acoustic Energy is a company that I actually don't know much about. I know that they were under Malaysian ownership at one point, and at the time, the direction of the company was different. I think they were producing even soundbars. 3 years ago, it went back to British ownership, and they've been producing like serious stereo speaker for the last 3 years. The reason why I have it is because the North America distributor reached out to me. I happen to know him, and he told me, Thomas, man, you got to try these speakers. They are amazing. And I'm like, okay, it's been a while since I reviewed a speaker in the 3,000-ish USD area. So yeah, send it over. And the first week I tried it, I have to say, I even messaged my friend and told him, you know what? I'm thinking about buying this speaker. I really like it. So I'm going to quickly go over the specs first. It has a two-way custom designed carbon fiber mid-bass unit. More specifically, 2 5-inch carbon fiber woofers, and one 1-inch carbon fiber tweeter housed in an aluminum waveguide. Sensitivity is 89 dB. Frequency range is 32 Hz to 28 kHz plus or minus 6 dB. Sensitivity is 6 ohms, 48 pounds, and it's not too big, 40 inch by 7 by 10 inch. The one I have is piano gloss white, and it can play very loud up to 115 dB. The two unique things about this speaker, as I mentioned, it uses carbon fiber tweeter and woofer. The second thing is the cabinet. Now they call it the Resonance Suppression Composite Cabinet. I'm going to quickly put it up here on screen. It's like a sandwich, the design, and you can read up on its benefit. So let's talk about how it sounds. The first thing I noticed when I turn it on is like, ooh, the tweeter sounds a little bit rolled off. That's my first reaction. But here's the thing though, usually when I come across a speaker that's a bit rolled off, my general impression is that there's a veil in front of it. Sometimes it can be a bit dull, but not this one. That's what's unique about it. When there's something that's sharp playing, you're going to hear it. It's going to be sharp. There's going to be plenty of detail, good clarity. And I think that what's missing maybe is that zing from a metal tweeter. But it's fine, because you know what? It's not sibilant at all. So you can go for a long listening session, and yet you're still going to hear all the detail, because I guess of the clarity. And I think this is what's very unique about it, because it's the first time I hear a tweeter that sounds like this. So for those of you who can't stand Focal speakers or monitor audios or BMWs, I would say that give this speaker a try. Now for those of you who are in love with Focals, still give this speaker a try. Now for the mid-range, you know, usually I'm used to speakers with a V-curve, boosted top end, boosted bass. This speaker doesn't feel like that. In fact, I would say that the mid-range feels a bit boosted. And the reason I say this is because when I play certain tracks that I'm very familiar with, you know, I have an idea, this is the vocal, this is the instrument, there should be certain volume. But with this speaker, I noticed that this vocal sounds a bit more center stage. It's a bit louder. So that's why I'm like, is it because the mid-range is slightly boosted? So for some people, you know, they'll love it, right? Because not everybody likes V-curve. And for me, it was a different experience. Now regarding the bass, this is where it really impresses me because it's ultra fast. It's very fast. I'm talking about almost maybe on par with the Focal Cantor speed. I didn't A/B test them. And as you know, Focal Cantors are like $12,000 speakers. The fact that it was able to pass my torture test, you see I have these bass tracks that I use to test the bass of a speaker, and it passed it, no problem. Not only that, it engaged me enough for me to listen to the whole track. Usually when I run a test, I'll run part of it, a few seconds, and then I stop and I move on. But for this speaker, I actually end up listening to the whole track because the bass was so good. So that's number one. Number two, the bass is tight. I call it toe tapping tight bass. That's my expression. Because I noticed that when bass is tight, I tend to follow by toe tapping. It digs very deep. The bass goes low. You know, this is half the size of my Harp F30. And yet, it's able to produce deep bass. So that's why I'm like, whoa, that's quite impressive. Next thing I noticed is that there's no artificial boost in the bass. Sometimes I hear it in some speakers, I think 80 Hertz, 100 Hertz, where there's a bump there. Gives the speaker a sense of muscularity. And this one, it doesn't. So you get a lot more detail in the bass. Now, it does take a bit of getting used to because, you know, if you're used to the V curve with the boosted bass, you feel like, okay, you wish there was a little bit more. Next, I think the biggest strength for me with this speaker is the soundstage it creates. It stretches beyond the speaker. It's spacious, there's depth to it. And maybe because it's the right size for my room, because it's not too big. And who knows, maybe it's the Dapolito configuration. I don't know, I don't design speakers. But it has a very good soundstage. I like the fact that I can hear the instruments clearly. The stereo imaging is good. Now, it's not the kind of speaker where you can take a pencil and draw around people. For me, for speakers like Focal, Totem, with the metal tweeters, they do really well in creating a soundstage where you can draw out the people. They're so precise, so sharp. This is not that kind of speaker, but this is the kind of speaker where you can hear each instrument clearly. And that I really like. So, like all speakers in the universe, there's no perfect speaker. There are things that I like about a speaker and there's things that I don't like about a speaker. So let's start with the areas of opportunity first. So number one, I noticed that I have to push the volume to a certain level for me to be satisfied with the bass. As I mentioned, there's no artificial boost in the bass. As a result, I notice when I want to get a bit of punch in the bass, I find myself pushing the volume up a little bit. You do get the punch once you start pushing the volume. Now, they do have a higher end model with more woofers. Maybe that speaker, you don't have to push the volume as high. I'm not saying concert level, I'm not saying crazy loud, I'm just saying relatively speaking. Number two, I notice with certain pairing, especially when you don't have enough power, it's okay when you play at normal volume, but the second you start pushing the volume, you might hear compression or it can become a bit shouty. So that's the second thing I notice. For example, the Cayin CS55A, it's fine as long as I don't push it past 10, 11 o'clock. So just keep that in mind. If you're somebody who listens loud, make sure you have a lot of power. So let's talk about what I like about this speaker. And there are a lot to talk about. Just look at the cabinet, the finishing, the rounded edges. This feels like a premium product. Wow, it is, over $3,000. Look at the feet. It's not often that you see a speaker at this price with feet like this. Next, I like the fact that the drivers are all carbon fiber, so the integration is actually seamless. And finally, the reason I really like this speaker is, of course, its performance. I think part of the reason is because when I was evaluating the speaker, I was also listening to other speakers 3-4 times its price. And I remember at the time, the feeling I get is like, man, this speaker is not that far behind the other speakers. In terms of soundstage, in terms of the speed of the bass, was what made me email my friends and tell them, you know what, I might consider buying this speaker. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up at this point, and there are two things I want to touch on. Now, the first one is more of an advice, something to think of, okay? If you ever go to an audio show, you go to a store and you go audition a piece of electronics, a speaker, and if you're impressed, in the first 30 seconds, I'm telling you, it's a possible red flag, okay? Because we're so easily impressed by boosted top end, boosted bass. And I have lent a lot of my gear to my friends, to my subscribers, and sometimes I get emails from them telling me, Thomas, man, this is so good. And I usually tell them, you know what, come talk to me after the honeymoon phase. Sometimes they come back to me and they go like, oh yeah, you know what, maybe it's not for me. See, the challenge is always, can it survive long listening session? If you go listen to the Acoustic Energy 509 at an audio show, at a store, it might not blow you away in the first 30 seconds because it doesn't have that boosted top and boosted bass, right? But if you have the patience to really listen for the soundstage, listen does the soundstage stretch beyond the speakers, listen for instrument clarity, listen for how the top end rolls off and yet retains a lot of the detail. If you can do all that, you might come to appreciate this speaker a lot. So the second thing, you know, every year I come across different gear that I try, and there are a few that surprises me. And then I have this mental list, gear you should try before you die as an audiophile. Last year was DB1 from PMC. First time I tried transmission line at my home, that's where I go like, wow, okay, this is going to be great for a lot of people. Now, gear that surprises me doesn't mean that they're the best, but I find them a bit different than what I expect. And for me, there's no such thing as the best speaker, for example, but there's the right speaker for everyone. And the point of watching all these videos is to discover new things, right? Unless you know about, let's say, transmission line, you'll never go listen to them. So this year for me, it was the Manipan LRS. That's where I go like, wow, that surprised me. And I think everyone should, at least at one point in their life, own a pair of Manipans. And the point is that you're listening to a speaker without a box. Maybe one day I'd like to try open baffle, for example. This year, I'll also put carbon fiber tweeter on the list. I think everyone should at least give it a try. Might be for you, might not be, but for some of you, I'm sure that you'll fall in love with it. But unless you know about carbon fiber tweeter, you'll never go listen to it. You'll never actively go look for it. So my point is that the next time when you get a chance, go actively look for it. The only thing is that whenever I come across something that sounds different, special, I always recommend Audition before buying, because they're so unique in their sound that it's not necessary for everyone, right? It's really targeted at a group of people that will fall in love with it. So I always say stuff like that, make sure you audition before you buy. And I'm confident that for a lot of you out there, this Acoustic Energy 509 is a very good solution for you. So with that said, I'll see you next time.